What's up, guys? Getting ready for another live Tier Talk Q&A. We are going to answer whatever questions that you have about working in corrections, prisons, or jails. And I just got the alert that we're live on all these different venues, which include LinkedIn, Facebook, and different groups of Facebook. So basically Facebook in general, and then all the different groups of Facebook. And I just want to tell you the live stream is brought to you by One American Military University. So if you're looking to seek that higher degree, again, bring experience back into the classroom, guys, check out American Military University. It is a great online school. And we also have Guardian RFID. So from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence, Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention centers of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. Okay, got the important stuff out of the way. Guys, it's going to be a great live Q&A. Whatever questions you got, we're going to be happy to answer them. And by the way, it's not just me. We also have Connie, Alleyne, the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon, which is now available on Amazon. Connie, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Connie, Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon. I'm looking forward to seeing, what kind of questions come our way tonight.
And by the way, it wouldn't be a full show if we don't have our other gentleman here. Well, other gentlemen. Well, I guess I'm a gentleman, right? I would assume so. I like to think so. We have the founder of Keepers of Chaos, Russ Hamilton. What's up, Russ?
Hey, Anthony, thank you for the promotion to gentleman there. It's something I never thought I would achieve in my lifetime. So it's great to be on board with that. And Keepers of Chaos, we're doing great. We're having, just a real good time, keeping it real, keeping it professional. And I think it's one of the finest things I've perhaps ever done.
And by the way, Russ, always a pleasure having you on as well. Guys, so a lot of stuff going on. I was able to get a hold of some leaked videos out of Arizona Department of Corrections. So you're going to see me, Russ, Connie, along with Brian Kovacs and another gentleman. We're going to be breaking down those videos. There was two videos in particular. I'm actually going to show you one momentarily, guys. It's tough to watch. It really is because, again, there's just so many issues related to this facility, which includes just understaffing, security concerns like cell doors that just open. But also another concern is inmates they call overrides, which are inmates that are higher level inmates that are allowed to live in lower level areas. So again, just a bunch of concerns. We're going to break down the video. We do have a lot of things we want to talk about in that video, including the response, when the response does get there. And by the way, guys, Inmate Manipulation, that book is available. It will be in the description. You can get it on Amazon, or you can now get it on, I'm going to say it, guys, Target. Target decided that, by the way, they didn't even ask me for permission, so I don't even know how they pay me out. All I just know, I'm bragging about, hey, my book's in Target. I'm bragging. I'm telling everybody. But, of course, the wife would have smacked the reality. How do you get paid from that? I said, ooh, don't know. So, thanks for being optimistic. I mean, that's why I married her. I mean, yeah, she was, but hey, we did get on target. That's a good thing. Hey, so real quick, we're going to answer whatever questions come our way. So guys, post up the questions. We're going to answer whatever comes our way. But in the meantime, let me show you guys the one video here. Guys, it is disturbing to watch. So bear with me. Now, listen, at the very beginning of the video, a lot of the action is in the up left-hand corner. So watch the up left-hand corner first, and then you'll start seeing the action come closer to the camera. But again, guys, look to the upper left corner. All right, here we go, guys. By the way, Jason Purvis says that he believes these inmates should be charged. I agree 100%. This should have been referred to the prosecutor immediately. Wouldn't you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, there's no reason not to. I can't understand why they wouldn't. except that maybe by keeping it, under wraps a little bit, then maybe they were hoping the video wouldn't get out and that it would all just go away, because this is pointing out to other larger issues that they've got at hand. And so now on top of the lack of manpower, the lack of response, whatever issue that they're having with cell doors and all the other things that they pulled, now they've got a cover up on their hands because they were trying to suppress these videos.
Yeah, and by the way, when there's an attack on staff, even Nebraska, they would. When there's an attack on staff, the video should be immediately sent over to the prosecutor's office from the investigative division. Obviously, this officer here has a lot of heart because he doesn't give up, man. I mean, that's what our heroes are made of. I mean, these inmates, obviously, they're jumping him, so they are getting the best of this gentleman, but he keeps it going. He doesn't give up. He stays in the fight. But the scary thing is, I'm sure Connie sees it too, is the lack of response.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sitting here and I just can't imagine that it's now been almost 2 minutes. And I mean, and I know in jail time, it's kind of like, okay, well, you got to suit up, you got to go through the motions. But the fact that he's essentially taken this beating for all this time is just insanity. And the fact that he starts out with 2 inmates at the bottom or 3, and then one walks away, then he comes back. Like, there's just a lot happening. I don't know. It was a lot to watch, just to say the least.
And the unique thing is, look at the response. I mean, obviously it's tough because the inmates know they're on camera. So, but the thing is that this would be an all-out response. It wouldn't be this gentle escort. I'm not saying to break, any rules, but again, you don't know if that inmate still poses a threat, So I felt that the response when they handcuffed the inmate, but again, the inmate's on camera. That's another thing, guys. Lately with these camera facilities, the inmates know, that they're going to get their beat down or whatever it is. Let's say they get the best of an officer, but they know they're under camera. So the moment the team comes in, all of a sudden they assume the position and they show that they're no threat. So now obviously the staff has to be careful in how aggressive that response is. But Russ, what's your thoughts on that particular response, the securing of that inmate after that assault?
It's a little bit difficult to say everything that's going on there and the things that I don't like about it. But one thing is, once you've had this kind of interaction with these inmates and they've done this and you don't have any idea whether they're armed or not, the only way I'm placing handcuffs on a guy like that is not from a standing position. It's got to be from the prone position, and he's going to have the opportunity to go down and get prone or be made to put in that prone position, because I'm going to demand that my safety be looked after first. And so what they're training these staff to do, I'm not sure. I would never have thought that was acceptable after an incident that critical, to simply, walk around lackadaisical. No, get on the ground now, spray, baton, if they're not going to get down. And then from that point there, handcuff them, because you don't know what's going on from this point. So I think that their response, their level of response, and the way they handle this situation really needs to be gone over. They need to develop a much more robust disturbance control plan than just lackadaisically walking around and looking like they don't have any cohesiveness. But that might be a function of what potentially the laws and admin and politics has done to this joint.
Yeah, I actually felt, even in the later video, there's another video, guys, which will show Thursday, and we break it down. You have a response that's very hesitant. And again, I still believe that this needs to be an aggressive response, even if the cameras are watching you, because again, the inmate's an obvious threat. And for this first video we watch, and I'm gonna ask Connie this, they kicked the officer in the head. So I'm thinking also attempted murder charges. I mean, Connie, head injuries. Let's talk about that.
I mean, so even before they kick him in his head, I mean, the moment that one picks him up and slams him down on his, like he falls like back head, like I'm automatically thinking concussion. I'm like his neck could be broken, like, but he like jumps back up and he's in the fight. And then, you know, it just kind of just continues. And then the kicking, of course, is just a lot. I mean, the thing that really bugs me, which I've never seen a response like this, especially in one of these events, is just everyone, there was like no sense of urgency to actually get there. And then even if, you know that, you know, he wasn't just being beaten up by one person. Those who came in, there was no one was suited up. There was no nothing. So it was almost like they were walking into the danger as well, but not protected and not able to necessarily protect him if in fact this was more threatening than it was. So like, I don't know, maybe you guys can give me some insight into why the response team would show up without equipment or sort of without that sense of urgency that you would usually see when there is, you know, an assault on staff.
Well, the intel I got, well, obviously these are both understaffed facilities. You only saw the one video. You'll see another video on Thursday. So the officers, the reason why there's a delay from what I'm getting is that the officers are not even part of a response team. They're coming from their respective units, their respective posts. So you're going at a facility that really does not have the proper staffing. That's one thing. And I agree with you. In the second video, guys, which we're not going to see today, we're going to show you Thursday, the hesitancy can be clearly seen from the two officers that are entering. Inmates already lay down in the prone position, but there's nobody quickly going after that inmate to secure them. They're just like standing back and just, you know, no one's making the effort. And I feel I would like to give the officers maybe the benefit of the doubt, and maybe they're concerned because they don't want to be too aggressive on the camera, but it's not what I'm thinking. From watching this video, I actually think the two first officers that came on the scene were fear-stricken. And I hate saying that, guys. I really do, because, you know, again, I believe in our profession. I believe in what we do. But, again, just by how they respond makes me question their heart, because like Russ said, you got this inmate right now, and it was also supported by one of the comments here. I think it was Facebook user. Where was it? The inmate should have hit the ground immediately. I didn't see any directives from that officer. He just casually walks up and just puts the handcuff up, automatically say, well, it's all right. The inmate already assumed the position. I can go ahead and no, I want to see directives. I want to see the inmate down on the ground. I want to see all that. Russ, the fact that we didn't see that inmate to me is still a threat.
One of the things that you go with in good, solid alarm response tactics and policies and procedures is once that alarm goes off, anyone that's left standing, they're involved. And if they're involved, then they're a target for being, put down forcefully if necessary. In my opinion, what should have gone on here is as soon as they entered, they should have, started giving those commands, and any kind of hesitancy to get down on the ground, then that gets met with force. You bring that OC spray in and you do what you have to do, because you don't know at this point whether there's going to be a counterattack on you. And just the idea, just because an inmate gets into, and you can see the inmate, he gets into that position where he's used to being cuffed up like that. And it's just, lackadaisical. There's no energy in the response. And I don't know what that speaks to. I don't know if that speaks to the fact maybe these guys were brand new. Maybe they hadn't been shown or trained properly with regards to getting that response in there and having it be robust, aggressive, and all of those other things that saves the day in the end. By going in there like that, you have the potential of adding victims to the scene. And then where do we draw from? Where does the response come from if we end up with 2, 3, 4, 5 more victims right there? It looked to me like they were already out of manpower.
Yeah, I like what Facebook says. And actually, that's exactly what it is, Russ. Understaffed facility. I mean, these people are coming from their post. The video only shows one inmate being placed in cuffs. I'm hoping more got locked up. I agree there were more inmates outside. You should also see them going down on the ground, eating the floor a little bit. And also the response was crazy. No one showed up ready to fight. That's what Russ was getting at. They just walked into the area. I do not know what agency policy is, but I hope my staff shows up ready to go to war. See, that to me is where the concern was. I felt that even though you had the officers come on scene, they still had no level of control. What would happen if that inmate decided just to turn around and punch the responding officer that came in? You know, I mean, the officer comes in so like nonchalantly, you know. And another thing, guys, because we're talking about the concerns in Arizona, these are concerns that are not just happening there. So again, when these videos get leaked out, we need to go back and look at our own facilities to make sure that this stuff isn't happening or could happen by us. And I expect management to be all involved. I expect frontline to be, you know, given the information that management needs. More importantly, management be acting on it. But this one statement from Jason Purvis is something I want to focus on a little bit. I'll start with Connie first, then Russ, then myself. But senior staff in Arizona is 3 years. No more OGs and DOC. Right now, guys, the incentives to maintain good staff and that respect where we're, you know, next to people with experience and kind of listening to them and letting them guide the way. Guys, we're losing that. We're not giving them that respect. In some cases, we're not giving any incentive to keep them. And like Purvis said, this is a big problem when your senior staff only has, let's say, 3 years in. But Connie, what's your thoughts on what he's saying? I don't think this is just an Arizona issue. I think we're losing a lot of senior staff across the nation.
We are. So we are seeing that experience tilt in the opposite direction, where you've got more experienced inmates than you do have staff. And I think, you know, yes, there are supposed to be retention efforts, and there's supposed to be efforts of us being more competitive as an institution where people will actually work there. But like, I don't know that any of us have actually seen the fruits of those efforts, you know, and really it makes it just more dangerous for us. Because all I'm thinking as I'm watching the video is, so if this is what the response team looks like, we're also setting the stage for the other inmates who are observing. Look how long it takes them. And when they come, this is what happens, right? There's really we don't have much to fear, right? If we were to choose to do this again. And for me, that would be the concern, because I've been in spaces where I've seen a response team and we just want to get out the way, right? Because we know they're coming in and they mean business. Whereas this response team comes in and you've got inmates kind of strolling around, and not to say like, you know, we know all of the moving parts and everything that was going on. I get, you know, coming from another post and all of that. But, you know, when we see stuff like this, you do have to realize that we are setting the tone for inmate expectations, right? And if we're responding like it's no big deal or there's no urgency in it, then that's sort of, they're taking their cues from us, right? So as far as the experience goes, maybe that stepping it up a notch comes with more experience. Maybe there's more confidence in that response when you've got the experience. You know, as not being an officer, I wouldn't be able to speak to that. But I know, having been in this environment, having worked with the officers for such a long time, I've seen very assertive responses where the inmates are down on the ground, hands up, like they know, like, don't even pick your head up. You know, that's not what we saw here.
Well, you know what, Connie, to touch on something is the backup is so important, because obviously that's what makes people feel safe enough to do the risky work that we do. So when you're working in a facility and you don't feel that backup's coming, or there's just not enough people to provide that backup, we become less motivated to go after that contraband or to take those risks. I mean, what motivates us is knowing that we have a group of people in our wings. But there's something you said that's so important that I want to kick it over to Russ. Hey, Russ, and I believe this, Scotty Willow also says it too, touched on what Connie said, was hesitation over fear of discipline is causing these lackadaisical responses that we 100%, so I was talking about the camera concern, and the inmates are constantly watching. So Russ, Connie touched on that. You know, you got the inmates now watching this non-response, if you will. So how does the outcome of this slow response how does that now affect a later code where the inmates decide to get a little bit more risky?
I think that this really actually, lowers your ability to deal with any and all situations that you go into like that. That's why it's so important to have that cohesive look when you get in, that command presence, that sense of urgency, and that you're bringing a lot of energy into that whole thing with you, so that you can actually, settle things out really quickly. I've been in thousands of incidents like that. And it was always, there was nothing lackadaisical about it. You went in there and you went in ready. And the last thing on my mind is what that camera is seeing, because I know I'm going to be right in my heart. I know I'm going to be able to write and put down and justify. I know what the law says. I know what policy says. I know what procedure says. And I'm able to equip myself in a manner on paper in order to make sure not only that I'm not going to get in trouble, but the charges are going to stick on these guys. And so what really needs to happen, in my opinion, there is a complete revamp of the training that you do, and everything from the report writing to the actual response of it. These officers need to feel that if they get into trouble with an inmate, that green herd is on the way and they're coming and you're going to be saved.
Yeah, guys. Again, we're going to break down the video a little bit more in depth on Thursday. There's going to be 5 of us. But again, we just wanted to put it out there because, again, these videos got released because it was leaked. You figure an incident happens like this in November, this video should be pushed out the next day, the day after. We want to get prosecution. We want to get these inmates, locked down. These inmates are now a threat, but now we just hide it. And unfortunately, it's the leak that got it discovered. That's our own, not management. That's our own stepping up, protecting ourselves, because we're the ones that have to survive behind this wall. So again, it's not just about the immediate response. It's also about, do we have the law protecting us? Do we have higher lawmakers saying, hey, attack one of us, attack one of those COs, and this is what's going to come down, the zero tolerance. But when we feel that we're not respected, we don't have that zero tolerance. And more importantly, when the inmates see that it's okay, that there's no zero tolerance, that fuck COs and staff that work in prisons, they're just expendable. Well, then there's nothing to deter the behavior. I'm going to be honest with you guys. In corrections, deterrence is key because that's what we rely on to be effective. But when we don't have that backing, both on the immediate level and at that higher level, what's motivating us from chasing after that contraband? What's motivating us from taking that risk? And the sad thing is that even when we don't have the backing, people still expect us to take that risk. You want us to take the risk, but you're not doing anything to help us or motivate us, to make us feel safe when we go ahead and take that risk. Because there's no lie about this. Anybody working in corrections, guys, everything you do has an inherent risk. But what motivates us is the fact that we know people have our back. And when you don't have that, who's really running the facility? That's the question. Hey, Russ, good question comes from Chip Davis. And now, guys, we'll focus on these videos on Thursday. I just wanted you guys to see it real quick. Chip Davis says, how do you deal with a department that denies workers comp for PTSD and concussions? Attacked in September 2020, diagnosed with PTSD and concussion also needed. Department hasn't checked on me. Don't feel valued at all.
That's a real downfall of some institutions, right? Some administrations and that kind of thing. And they should be checking up on you. They should be, wondering where their guy is, how he's doing, when he's coming back, if he can come back, and what he needs. For them to just, abandon you, it's unconscionable. So the best thing that I can tell you is do everything you can for yourself in the range of the moment. And what I mean by that is you simply want to go get yourself a lawyer, right? Get a workman's comp lawyer, and then work from that end of it to get what you have coming with regards to whatever settlement you can get, to whatever degree of possible, future disability, whether it's, 2, 3, 4, 5, 50%, whatever it is, and take care of you first, right? Because they obviously aren't going to help you with taking care of yourself. So you got to get that first in. And then if you get that chance to return, then you have to turn this into a thing about how you're not going to let that happen to someone else, that you're going to get the training you need to promote yourself further on and to make changes in that department if you feel that they still deserve you. So I think that's about the best. I think that's about the best I really have for you.
Yeah, guys. I definitely want to get Connie's thoughts on this. When you get hurt on the job, the sad thing is that you could tell if your department or your managers or your supervisors, definitely not going to say leaders, if they care about you or not, when they're more concerned about your physical healing as opposed to your mental healing. I mean, obviously, if you get assaulted on the job, you know, they're like, okay, well, the doctor has you out, let's say, for a couple of weeks. Okay, fine. Now I healed physically, but it would be great for the agency to say, okay, now that you have the time to heal physically, let's go check on you mentally. Let's see, you know, if you're able to just go right back into the environment that you were majorly assaulted at. So I think there has to be a shift in how we view the people that are coming back to work. I mean, is it just, okay, they healed physically, let's put them right back in, let's get them going? Or is there that one leader that says, hey, guys, before we put this person back in, before we put them back at the post where they were just majorly assaulted, are we having anybody check on them mentally to see if they're okay, and make sure that we provide them with an environment that lets them say if they have a concern or a problem? I mean, we're so concerned about, you know, making sure that they heal physically. I think that we forget that there's a mental component to this as well. Would you agree with that, Connie?
Yeah, I mean, so I just want to bring another perspective to the table, which is, I'm not saying that, you know, the agency doesn't have an obligation. So let's just be clear. What I am saying, though, is that from a labor relations perspective, only because I experienced this myself, when someone is out on workers' comp, it can be perceived, if a supervisor or someone calls to check in, it can be perceived as almost harassment, or as though that supervisor is trying to merely get insight into whether or not this person can return to work. And so for some people where it's uncertain what the intention is, it can create some issues for the institution that there's someone contacting someone who's out on workers' compensation. Now, I think what it does speak to is the lack of relationship that management may have with their staff, right? Because if I have a relationship with my staff and I'm calling to check on them to see how they're doing, it will not be misinterpreted as I'm calling to see if they're ready to return to work, right? Like, I'm never trying to assess their viability for the front line. However, you know, I went through a whole situation with another manager where their intention was to call and check because they didn't quite have a relationship with that staff person, it felt like their manager was harassing them, like trying to figure out whether or not they could come back to work. And they didn't really feel as though management cared whether or not they were mentally or physically able to come back to work. So there is that fine line. For those who are managers, if you have a relationship with your staff and you feel comfortable reaching out, I think by all means, it is the right thing to do. It is the human thing to do. If someone has experienced an assault at work, any sort of injury at work, that we casually call and check to make sure they're okay. Do they need anything? You know, I think the other side to that, though, is when there is no presence of someone who's just reaching in to make sure that you're okay, you do feel abandoned. You feel that your agency has abandoned you and they're not there to support you. And while you would want to get someone reaching into you, you can also reach out, right? Like if there was a captain, there was a lieutenant, there's a nursing supervisor, whoever you're close to, you can reach out to them and say, hey, I just want to check in. You know, here's how I'm doing. You know, if there's something that you need, oh, here's something, you know, I know that you guys generally send cards or flowers or whatever. You can actually say, hey, you know, I could use, you know, a Stop and Shop gift card, like whatever that is, right? Because there's no, I think there's no rules to the game as far as how do we engage with each other. So like, it's really important in my mind that we both take ownership for maintaining that relationship and making sure that our staff is truly feeling supported during these tough times. Now, the one thing I want to just throw out there is that as we're going through all of these things that are happening in the workplace. For the people who sort of, we're saying we want, corrections to be an occupation of choice. When we see videos like this, it's hard to say, I want to go do that. Right. And so if we can't show that we got each other's back all the time, or that, and I'm not saying this as a dig to the staff that was there, because I understand the understaffing issues and really how it's plaguing our entire system. But it is these kind of incidents that make it very difficult for us to recruit people, to retain people. And so this issue of there being more experienced inmates than there are experienced staff is only one that's going to continue to perpetuate.
Yeah, and guys, one of the awkward moments going back on the PTSD is when you realize that your job doesn't really have a care for you, and then when you go back to work, you bump into those managers that never checked on you once. But then all of a sudden, when you have that dialogue because they're touring your unit, it's like, no, okay, hey, everything's good. Yeah, we were worried. Were you? Because I didn't get any phone calls from you. I mean, especially when you work in a more tighter environment. Obviously, you have some facilities that are huge, but there are also some very small facilities that, the connection's very immediate, or sometimes the overnight shifts, which have a lot less individuals. Usually I find them to have a bigger connection. So it's crazy when all of a sudden the people that you thought, cared kind of don't bother to acknowledge you the whole time you're out. And then when you come back, now they have to finally see you face to face, and it feels like there's a false level of sincerity. And also another thing too, guys, is that sometimes when an incident first happens, we're all with that person, next to that person, but then eventually starts to fade. So a lot of the times people realize that, and they kind of just go through the moments, but in the end, it's like maybe 2 or 3 that really keep that constant check, to make sure that person is okay. I wish we could keep that straight through. The moment something happens, we all kind of have that same regard, that concern, and we carry that level through to let that person know they're not being forgotten. I feel that there's a lot of people that want to work in corrections. It was their dream job. I've covered this in a show. And within their maybe first 2 years or something like that, they get injured and they get forced to leave. They didn't want to leave, but they get forced to leave because whatever the injury is, it stops them. And nobody checks on this individual anymore. Again, they were new to the system. They wanted to be in the system. But now they got injured. They're out. And no one checks to kind of keep that connection going, that bond that the person maybe liked within that first year. As I said, I know there may be some people that, get injured and kind of like, what, I'm done and want to quit. But there are some that will try to get themselves back into it all and want to get back in and connect with that family. And the sad thing is they wind up having to leave very early in their career, and then we forget about them. I remember having an email where someone just said I was like forgotten, and I felt like I wanted to go back in the profession. I couldn't. And people just forgot about me. He goes, at the very beginning, everybody was caring about me. Everybody was concerned, but then it started to lessen. And I think out of it all, maybe 1 or 2 people once in a while check in. But, this person, again, was family for the first couple of years, got injured. Hey, Russ, I'm sure that happens a lot, correct?
Yeah, and we don't want to leave those people alone. We want to try and remember them. Sometimes, if you were never close to them, you might not think about them so much. But you know what? The ones that were close, we want to pull them in and at least say hi, keep in touch. It's easy to do, man. We've got Facebook, we've got YouTube out there, we've got all these wonderful platforms, and so I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to keep in touch. Let's think about those people that have given a significant portion of their life and their health in order to protect society, protect you, and let's make sure that we go in there and we think about keeping them as part of our circle, because they were at one time, they were family.
Yeah, I like what Abina says. People don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. We got a good question that I posted up before. And I'll start with, I don't know if Connie can answer this. This may be more of me and Russ. And actually, to be honest with you, I don't know if I could really answer this. And I'll tell you why. So I started my career at a female facility. So I never did strips. When I was a sergeant and worked at a male, now I'm currently in Memphis City, I supervised them. So I definitely, were able to see strips. But to be honest with you guys, because at the beginning of my career, I've really never conducted a strip. So please don't judge me, but we have to be honest here, right? So maybe I'll sit back. I do know some things, but just from observing as a supervisor, what I would expect from the officer, but also what I would expect from the inmate. I mean, think about during strips, we have all these PREA guidelines to protect the inmates, but what do we really do to protect the staff from inmates that are unprofessional? Right now, you have transgender inmates that are allowed to have a search preference. So now you have female officers that could be stripping them, and these inmates could be very unprofessional with those female officers. So what are we doing to protect our female staff? So what do we expect? What from our staff? I copy that. But what do we expect from those inmates who are being stripped? But Russ, let's talk about that relationship during a strip search. What do we got, Russ? This is on you, man.
Strip searches, they just become one of those things where it's not a big deal. It's not like, this is the first time this inmate's ever been searched. It's not like the first time that you've ever done a strip search, except for the very first one you do, obviously. And it just becomes that thing where it's a matter, this is the business that we're handling. This is the business we're taking care of right now. And, they go through the motions, you go through the motions, you give them the proper commands, you look for the contraband, you do what you're supposed to do, they do what they're supposed to do, and that's the end of it. And then you move to the next one. And I mean, I've been in lines where I've done, a couple hundred strip searches in a row, not an unusual thing. So there's not some sense of, this is an odd situation. There is a sense of normalcy in this. This is what officers expect. This is what inmates expect. And it's just part of what we go through on a daily basis. And, after you've done this for a couple of months, it seems more like the norm than not.
Yeah, and I do, from my end, when I supervise the strips that I did supervise, I do expect it to be professional, no joking around, obviously. Let's get right into the point. Let's get it done, because it could be uncomfortable. But like what Russ said, we get kind of used to it, but I also want to make sure we don't get complacent. So what Russ meant when we get used to it is that it's not uncomfortable to the point that we know this is part of our job and they know what's expected from us. So same thing as a doctor to patient type thing, this is what we're going to do. Let's get through the motions. The complacency aspect I want to make sure is that we're actually doing the strips, that we're not letting the inmate kind of joke their way through it. I mean, we're talking about, I know it's the same thing every day, but are we, doing everything? Are we stripping it? Are we checking the clothes? Are we having the inmate going through all the orifices? Whatever has to be done to make sure that we're fully checking that inmate, and to make sure that if I'm the one that did the strip, am I comfortable with having that inmate be released back to whatever that unit is? I believe when it comes to strip searches, it's one of the most important things that we have to do, no matter how uncomfortable. But if you have a professional officer, and I'm gonna say even an inmate that understands what's supposed to be done, it's not uncomfortable. It's smooth, and we keep it going. I'm not going to ask Connie that question because it will lead to many investigations. So, but we can give it a shot, Connie.
I've had the experience, though.
Huh?
I've had the experience.
All right, so you work. Hold on, let me just explain why she had the experience. Connie did work in medical, so different type of strip. But Connie, I think there's a bit of a, so how do you? I don't know. How do you? Is it a strip search? It's not a strip search, right?
So, when we've got people coming in and, so we've had the experience of female inmates who will come in through intake with cell phones in their jail purse. And so we've had to be a part.
Connie, there's people from the outside watching, so you're not going to just go over that without telling us what a jail purse means.
Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, can you clarify? I don't know what that means, Connie.
I've never heard that.
You guys are the worst. You guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, so we've had female inmates come in and they have their phone pushed up in their vagina far enough that the whole strip process that would typically be done by the intake crew wouldn't be able to find it. right? And so we may know that because the woman's sitting on the bench and you're hearing the vibration, but you don't see the actual, there's no phone, right? They've already searched her and all this stuff, right? So there has been incidents of getting pulled into intake and having to go through a whole different type of situation in order to gain access to whatever she might have placed in her person, right?
Now, by the way, I want guys to realize something too, because Connie's touching on something very important, and no pun intended on that. Yeah, guys. Be honest with you guys. If there's that contraband that maybe, let's say, staff can see has clearly been inserted into that individual, custody staff cannot go after that contraband.
Yeah.
So, Connie, can you explain how we may get that contraband?
Right. So, sometimes we'll have that person placed in a dry cell. That way, once it comes out, like they're already under watch and we can actually see that it's come out. I've had the unfortunate experience of not being allowed to do, so different, I guess, how do I say it? So different leadership will support or not support certain efforts in order to secure contraband. And under one leadership, we were not allowed to do an X-ray to actually see what was there. And under a different leadership, we were allowed to do the X-ray to see what was actually placed in the female's cavity. So I think we have to understand that sometimes we're allowed to go the extra mile and other times we're not. And that guidance may vary, although we have policies and procedures in place that provide us with the appropriate guidance on how we support you guys finding contraband.
Yeah, like some facilities obviously would put the inmate, let's say the inmate's being a little bit resistant, but it's we're trying to get the contraband. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll put the inmate on a constant watch in a dry watch cell, and hopefully the contraband would pass. Again, no eyes are being taken off that inmate. It's going to be a 24-hour contraband watch, and hopefully it passes. But it gets to be at one point where if this contraband is a threat to the inmate's well-being and safety, that could give us the reason to hopefully push for, hey, doc, we got to get this contraband out. Russ, have you ever dealt with contraband that maybe, it was so deep into the individual, no pun intended, please bear with me on this, that, it was a discussion as we know something's there, but how are we going to get this out?
Yeah, we had a situation, as a matter of fact. I live with the crime scene photos imprinted on my memory, unfortunately, where this guy, he had managed to insert a shampoo bottle all the way up inside. The shampoo bottle was filled with drugs and various paraphernalia. And it just got to a point where he was actually in some serious distress and they were unable to get it out. They actually had to do surgery. They had to open him up and they had to use that. I guess they had to run the gut and to be able to move things out. And that was a very serious situation. He did end up catching a case for that. We had another inmate one time on death row that got a hot sauce bottle stuck up there. He was actually on death watch at the time. And so that was a big deal because that was a very serious security concern. What else is he trying? What else might he have up there? So we always, do the x-ray, make sure, God forbid, it's not a gun or a handcuff key or something like that. We had another case, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. He came in with a handcuff key, stuck up there. And the only reason that we found it is we had a real good guy on the metal detector, up and down. And so we said, you know what, this guy's so high profile, he's going to be looked at, under the x-ray. And so I've had a number of guys that I've actually had to hold them in place for the x-ray because they were so violent, swallowing razor blades and all kinds of crazy stuff I could tell you about.
Hey guys, Lady CEO asks a great question. I'm going to start with this first, go to Connie, and then also I'll get Russ's perspective. I have a male inmate that has his penis out when I do a round, but he's not saying anything. I currently chose to act like I'm not seeing it, not to give him attention that he's looking for. Correct? Okay, Lady CO, first off, thank you for your service, but that's the wrong response. 100%. So you got to realize something. Again, this kind of relates to what we discussed in the manipulation Decoded book, which is now available on Target. Nice plug. Thanks, Lady CO. I appreciate that. But one of the concerns we have here is that if you're not making a stand and making it known that you don't tolerate it, the inmate will actually think it's permissible, but not just that inmate, other inmates. So next thing you know, just by you not responding and letting it be known that you don't tolerate that, and worst comes worst, you're going to be, you're going to write it, you're going to document it, you're going to do whatever you can, you're going to bring it to your supervisor's attention, you're going to expect action from them. There has to be a consequence for that, because if not, you are not just permitting that inmate to do it, but you're permitting others to do it. And next thing you know, and I'm telling you, this is no joke, guys, don't take this as a joke. So please, I'm as serious as possible with this. You're going to have a unit full with inmates that are just whipping out their penis because you're choosing to ignore it. You have to act it. You have to act on it, make it known that's unacceptable, write it up, document, forward it to your supervisor, expect them to give you some action. Because I'm going to tell you something on another note. If this happened on the streets, would ignoring it be the right answer? Hell no. So why should you allow it there? Dignity, integrity. You're a woman, who wears the badge, walking that beat. You expect the inmates to be respectful. So the moment you catch it, you turn around and you address it. Now, I will say this. If it's an open area, be careful when you address it. I guess it call for a supervisor immediately, and then both you and the supervisor or you and the backup can address it. I always want to make sure that when you address it, it's safe for you to do so. So maybe, again, I don't know if you work in a dorm, you see it, it's like, okay, you get what you got to get as long as you address it. But when you address it, one thing, it has to be addressed. Second thing is I want to make sure that when you address it, it's safe for you. You could have a sexual predator. So the last thing I want you to do is go address it, and that gives the inmate his chance to get a hold of you. But the key is that you have to address it. You cannot ignore it. I'll go with Connie first and then Russ. Connie?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much just said it all. I mean, this is not something that can go unchecked. It happens. You have to check it because they will automatically assume that you like it and that you want more of it, right? And you don't want to unintentionally send the wrong message or the wrong signals to him or anybody else who knows that he's doing it and they think that you think it's okay. And so I don't want to belabor it, but Anthony did just hit it spot on. It is definitely not something that you can ignore. And really your safety is first, just understanding that it could escalate. And so if it is a situation where there's a sexual predator, you want to make sure that you are handling yourself and that situation in a space where it's safe.
Yeah, and before Russ goes, hey, Jamil, send me your question again. But Jamil, if that's the question about the strips, we did answer that. So if you get the chance to watch the replay, we covered it. But if it's another question I missed, please submit it again. But go ahead, Russ. What's your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, you have to look at this from the perspective of what it is that we do, which is law enforcement. Okay, so this inmate, once he's been told one time, he's at the point then where he is breaking the law, and it doesn't matter that it's happening inside of a prison, right? All that matters is that this thing has to be documented at that point. Potentially in the system that I worked in, this would be an incident package. It goes from being that incident package to getting referred to the district attorney for possible prosecution. And that may take several different routes because this guy, he might be a frequent flyer on that on the outside. So by ignoring it, it just doesn't potentially make things worse in the future for you working a unit with others that might get involved like that, but it makes it worse for those on the outside that might become a potential victim of his. There's something wrong with a guy that does that. He's maybe not acting out toward a person at this point in what he's doing with that idea about, he wants to be an exhibitionist, but there's a point at which he'll step over those bounds. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we draw a clear line of documentation to be able to get the best possible prosecution out of that. Now, it may not prosecute that particular time, It might go on the next. It might add something toward where you might be called in as a witness when he does something out there on the streets. So what we're actually doing here is we're providing for the safety and security of the public, of other officers, and of other inmates and other potential victims. So that's why documentation is the route to go, and not just, thinking that it's going to go away, hoping that it's going to go away, and letting it potentially fester.
I'm going to add something else to that as well. But Jamil, we did answer that question. So if you watch the replay, after we showed the video, we attacked the video a little bit. And then after the video, what we did was we answered the strip search question. So if you get a chance, please check it out. It's going to answer everything you just asked there. I want to touch on something else because Russ hit some very good points that I want to touch on. I would actually also, if possible, if the inmate does this, Russ mentioned something about eventually these inmates get released. You could have a sexual predator. I would actually, if this is repetitive behavior from that inmate, the good thing about documenting it is that we could forward the inmate to mental health for some form of risk assessment. And then they could make, hey, you know what, this inmate could be a sexual predator. So again, we could document it, forward that to the mental health department to see if they want to review this inmate for some form of risk, because maybe they are a sexual aggressor. And then I'll tell you something, when they look to go get released that day, they find out that, hey, guess what? That behavior that you were doing just got you committed. Just got you committed, because at that point, all this documentation, that's going to be a risk when you put that inmate out there. So definitely document. Make sure something's happening with that documentation. And guys, if you're in the management position or if you're that supervisor, recommend the inmate to mental health for a risk assessment. Maybe an inmate like that should not be in an open dorm. Maybe an inmate like that should be, again, locked up by themselves. And the good thing about doing that risk assessment, it doesn't just protect staff, it protects probably a vulnerable inmate that they could get celled with eventually. So there's a lot of components with that, as Russ said, and Connie touched on, are preventive in nature. But in the end, this person could get released. Maybe we could stop that if he's just not ready to get out there. Maybe documenting, having that risk assessment may wind up getting that person committed. But that depends on the work that you're willing to put in behind that wall. But I think we all established that you have to address the concern. So another good question that came our way, and I'll go with where is it? I'll go with we'll go with Connie first, and then we'll go with Russ and myself. No. Who did we went Connie first last time. Let's go with Russ real quick, and then we'll go with Connie. John V asks, how do you feel about brass that micromanage and make staff feel uncomfortable at times? Now, guys, from the outside looking in, brass means our supervisors. That's what it means. So, Russ, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's pretty typical of a supervisor that doesn't have confidence in themselves. They feel like they can manage outcomes by managing everything that you do. And it's really a bad policy, just as far as, the philosophy that you should want to have as a supervisor is to take your people, train them, cultivate them, and let them pretty much do their own thing, because your training should have that effect on them. The idea that you're going to be able to have all the right outcomes because you're going to be actually the one that's doing it, it's just, it's a false supposition in your head. You can't possibly expect to be effective working in corrections by going that route. So what you have to do is you have to be that person that's willing to put in the training, the person that's willing to invest in your people, the person who's willing to, become the best supervisor they can be, and learn to, give the directives and saddle up and take that responsibility on yourself and be responsible for the outcomes of your people. They will respond to that. They will eventually share your vision, but they're not going to do it if you're so constantly in their business that they don't have a chance to learn what it takes to become their own correctional officer and their own chance to buy into your vision.
Yeah, now, by the way, guys, we actually did a whole video on micromanagement, so it's a great question. Me and Connie, Russ, we've always attacked this. Russ being a frontline supervisor was not a micromanager. Connie, as well, being a high-level admin side, was not a micromanager. But Connie, the funny thing is a lot of people look at micromanaging and they look at, like, what does that say about the employee? It's not the employee. What's that say about the manager? Right,
absolutely.
Connie?
Yeah. So here's the thing. If as a manager, you haven't done your job as to training your staff in the way that they should go, like then you have to feel uncomfortable. You feel uneasy letting them out on their own. But the key to any good leader is empowering your staff to make decisions and letting them know that their decisions are going to be supported by you, right? Because the last thing you need is staff out there who's scared, staff who don't want to make decisions, staff who are hesitant, especially in our environment where we know that it could be a matter of life and death. And for me anyway, the experience of empowering people and allowing them to go do the job that they were hired to do, that they've been trained to do, they come to you more so with solutions than with problems, because now they know they've got ownership of this unit. They know they've got ownership of the work that they do. But I think for the manager who's sort of in this space of micromanaging, that person isn't quite in control of themselves, for one. And two, I think it speaks to their own insecurities. They don't feel that comfort in allowing the staff to go out and do what they have to do. Sometimes that micromanagement, it comes from a place of self-preservation, right? They may not know or they may not feel comfortable in their current roles. And so they feel if they manage what everyone does, that they're going to be safe. And that does just the opposite. No one wants to have someone on their back while they're working. I'm doing my job. Let me do my job. If I need anything, because that's how you build a relationship with the staff, is they'll come to you because they feel comfortable in coming to you to say, hey, listen, I just want to troubleshoot this thing with you, right? I just want to brainstorm something with you. Or this thing happened in the unit. I wasn't quite sure how to deal with it. Here's all of the things I did in order to resolve it, but it didn't get resolved. Like, that's a very different conversation as opposed to a micromanager who is going to call your unit and tell you what to do every step of the way. It takes away the ability to develop critical thinking skills that you need to have on your own.
Yeah, I mean, Connie, obviously you and Russ hit everything. The only thing I would have when it comes to micromanagers is, as you start to move up your area of responsibility, it increases. So at one point, I mean, you may feel that micromanaging is effective, but it's not. First off, it's going to overwhelm you. And the other thing is it's going to disenfranchise, one, the employees that want to grow, that want to be empowered. So you're going to lose out on employees. But then the employees that really don't want to move forward and grow, they become reliant on you. They start giving you sloppy work because they know that, well, you're going to pretty much do it for me anyway. So I'll just half-ass it. And eventually, as you start to move up, it gets to the point where you need to trust people to get the job done. So again, it becomes tough too, guys. Let me just say something real quick. What becomes tough sometimes is sometimes the agency can overwhelm the managers, and the managers may not have enough time to really develop and cultivate their people. You have to make the time to do it. You can't expect the agency to give you an hour here or there to cultivate. And, that's what you do as a leader. You find the time amongst the chaos to cultivate. Those are the people that get remembered, guys. I'm telling you something right now. It's the people that actually find time being overwhelmed that still have the ability to say, hey, you know what? Let me help you through this. But in the end, I still want you to do it. I think the end result is, and I think that this is what micromanagers kind of don't do, is you want to make sure that you want to transform people into being leaders themselves. You want to give them the power to make decisions and, deal with the victories, but also the consequences, the negative consequences of, we're not going to get every decision right. We're not going to get every decision right. And sometimes how you learn, as long as it's not a risk to the facility, how you learn is through those mistakes, through those errors. So if you're constantly on that person and not giving them a chance to embrace both failure and success, you're not cultivating them for the responsibility that it takes to become that leader at the highest level. So right off the bat, micromanaging, it disenfranchises people. It says, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. And to me, it kind of, like Connie said, it's a manager who's insecure. Literally, it's a manager who's insecure, who hasn't been able to let go of that frontline responsibility. And now you're just jumping into the supervisory position with no ability to delegate and still wanting to be, that front line. Guys, don't get me wrong. You have to have that relationship with that front line. I'm not saying to forget your roots, but you also are in a position where you're to empower others, not to micromanage them, because at the end, you're going to lose out on the good employees that are looking to grow and not looking for them to breathe on their shoulders. I mean, that to me is the and I like what Connie said, micromanagers undermine any authority that staff has. Yeah, guys, imagine this too in corrections. And maybe we could actually just go another round with this real quick, because Connie just, and let me have Connie go first on this, then Russ, because Connie just mentioned something. In corrections, you cannot be micromanaged in front of the inmates. That, to me, is the biggest kick in the back. There's no way that you could run a unit effectively if you have your fucking supervisor behind your back questioning everything you're doing in front of the view of the inmates. So, Connie, you said undermine. Obviously, that word's there for a reason. Let's talk about your experience with being micromanaged, because that's experience there. So what happened, Connie? Did you feel that at one point?
So, of course, you feel that, right? So, working in a facility, all female inmates, you've got tons of moving parts, and you're constantly making decisions, right? Whether it's how many nurses you have in medical, how many in mental health, how many are covering the floor, how many are supporting, how many covering MAT. It's like all these decisions that you have to make in order to make sure that, one, your staff is supported, but also the workload is addressed. And so having central office come into a facility to sort of make decisions for you is not something that you ever want, right? Because everyone now sees these strange folks from central office come into a facility. They want to know why they're here, right? Did something go wrong? What happened? That's first and foremost. But then it's the questions, right? It's like, okay, so what didn't someone do that central office had to come, right? And so my experience was central office really just was focused on maintaining our overtime numbers, keeping those overtime numbers down, and whatever that meant, right? So if you ran short, you ran with two, whatever that was, that's what you needed to do just to make sure those numbers were down. However, as an administrator who's living, breathing, working with my team, it's not okay for them to not be able to take a break. It's not okay for them to not be able to manage their caseload, manage the workload, to be stressed out. And so it's easier for a central office to come in, be the heavy, and make this decision void of the impact to the staff, as opposed to me, that's like, I can't do that to them. They can't work that way. And so what happens, though, is you now will have the inmate population who sees like, oh, central office has come in and they're going to tell Miss Connie what to do, right? And what does that look like when now I'm getting letters written into me from the inmates complaining about this doctor, that doctor, whatever. And when I address it, it's now them feeling empowered to question the way I've addressed the letter. Oh, can you send that to this person so they could read it? I don't think they'll feel the same way you do, right? And I feel like that's just another way that undermining comes in when folks who aren't attached to the facilities, who aren't close to the work, who aren't close to the population, want to make decisions that have negative impacts on the staff, and they don't understand how that impacts everything else we do in the facility.
The ripple effect. Guys, the funny thing is the front line is usually the longest. I mean, they're the ones that they're going to be there for a while. So they understand about that ripple effect, because most of them are there long enough to deal with that ripple effect. When you have people that are moving up, especially admin, they're quick to do immediate decisions because they may not be there long enough for that ripple effect. And Russ, let's talk about micromanaging an officer working a unit.
Well, this is that thing that, one way or another, we come back to it time and time again, because apparently we have a lot of people out there that never learn that lesson. These chains of command, they exist for a reason. And the kind of thing that I just hate seeing happens is, we have these supervisors that for whatever reason, they short circuit that, they give things back to the inmate, they're not making sure that they're really invested in that whole safety and security aspect, and they just kind of feel like they want to look good instead of trying to feel like they want to look effective, because there's a difference between being effective and being obedient. And some of these supervisors, they really would prefer just that obedience without regards to the efficacy of being good at keeping the public safe, of being good at keeping a yard safe, of being good at keeping, the inmates over here safe, even from each other. So I think that, that's just the thing that we've got to understand, that if you really want to be a leader, you can't be doing the whole micromanaging thing, because you're going to short circuit your effort there. And notice I said leader. I'm not talking about being a supervisor. Anyone can pin on some brass, anyone, right? But it's different to be that leader. And you'll see them out there without any brass on their collar. You'll see that officer that comes over in the midst of a situation and is telling the lieutenant what to do, is telling the sergeant what to do, right? Look to those people. Get a clue from them. Model yourself after that. You'll be far better off than thinking that you're going to swerve every little outcome that comes your direction.
Yeah, I like what Russ said about the leadership, guys. That comes in any member, guys. It's not about your position. Position is just maybe the opportunity to lead. But technically, it's about how you carry yourself. I mean, do you have the love of the people around you, the people next to you, even the people above you? I've seen a lot of higher ups go to the people down below for advice, because they know that this person is has an expertise. And one thing about leaders is you also know that it's fluent. It flows. Maybe at one moment I'm the person, but at next moment, maybe it's Russ. Leaders sometimes have to know they don't have all the answers. And I like what Russ said about, it's not about impressing. It's not. It's about, let me be effective, and what's the best way I can do that. And I think for people that are leading, you have to always encourage growth. Micromanagement is the opposite of growth. It's the opposite of growth. If you're spending your time micromanaging individuals, guys, you're not doing anything to help your people grow. I mean, that's the key. And then you wind up having a staff that's resistant. Andy said something that was pretty cool. I know we lost Russ, and hopefully he comes back. Andy said something that was pretty cool. Andy's been on our show once in a while, guys. We get a chance. He's in some of the episodes, a few months back. He's going to start coming back in again. I know he was, oh, there we go. We got Russ back.
Wow. That was
yeah,
amazing.
it's Russ. YouTube's very liberal. No, I'm kidding. So Andy said something that I think hits home. It goes, do managers focus on the how and leaders focus on the why? If I could start with this first, and then I'll go to Russ or Connie, whoever wants to go next. Managers kind of maintain the status quo. That's their job. I think leaders, they look to move things forward. Plus, they look to address the intangible, like employee morale, growth, vision, more important, vision. So I think when it comes to people that are leaders, as opposed to managers, it really is about the why. Where's our value? Where is our beliefs? How do we connect to each other based on that? Because if you can connect to your team based on beliefs and values, then you can motivate a vision that everybody connects to, and then you have everybody invested. So I think the main difference here, and I love what Andy said about the how versus the why. The how is great. Tells you how the job gets done. But the learning really comes from the why it has to be done, and I really do think that good leaders are able to bring people together on a common vision and push things forward where everybody feels that they're a part of something, and everybody at all time is growing, including the leader. All because you're in the position to lead doesn't mean that you stop growing. It means you continue to grow. But the key here is that you also start to serve the people that you are now supervising, if you will, because that's the key too, guys. Good authority comes when you go to help the people that are underneath you. Your good leadership is about service to others. So again, I and Con, if you want to go first, I think the key here that Andy was getting at is that, if you're a good leader and you have to get a vision across. You know, you really do have to connect with the values and the beliefs of your, I don't even want to say subordinates, because guys, leaders don't have subordinates, they have followers. I learned that from John Maxwell. So again, so leaders have followers. So if I'm able to really connect with my people and I know what they're about, and then together we build on this vision together, there's the why that motivates you during the most rocky of times, because this profession could be shit. So the external incentives doesn't always carry you through. It's the why. At the end, if someone says, why do you go through all this shit that you're going through? It can't be because of the money. You know, it's going to be because I feel there's a purpose here. I feel that I'm serving something great. Or I have a family here that, you know, behind the wall, that we're committed to doing something that's greater than ourselves. It's a service to others. But Connie, what's your thoughts on Andy's topic?
So managers, as we know, are task-driven. Managers are task-oriented, right? You give a manager a list of tasks to accomplish within a given day, and the manager will make sure those tasks are accomplished, right? Because that's what a manager would do. A leader, on the other hand, has the vision to see how those tasks all come together to create this whole, right? Here are all the moving parts that the leader is kind of positioning and moving around to make sure that whatever the big goal is, all these moving parts that the manager is managing is leading up to accomplish the vision, the mission, right? So I look at the manager as the person sort of managing the people, managing the process. And I look at the leader as the person who's establishing the vision and sort of doing some of the delegation. The leader is the person who sort of has the bigger picture and is not looking at the staff as their direct reports, but this is my team and this is what we're working towards. So I feel like with leadership, there's sort of, here's the bigger picture. And with managers, it's sort of, here's what we need to manage from day to day.
Yeah, and Russ, I just want to touch on what I think it's Crippler. He says the leader knows all his staff's strengths and weaknesses and tries to eliminate the weakness. I love that, because there's a compliment. And believe it or not, and Russ, I know we'll definitely go into this. We talked about this before. Everybody has their strengths. In the process, we may rely on those strengths, but we also should be making an effort to teach those strengths to others. So we do have a team that can complement and can, you know, grow together. In the end, you know, there's so much in this profession. No one's going to know everything 100%, but we can balance each other to the point where together we can solve almost anything. But Russ, what's your thoughts on this?
Okay, and just getting back to what Andy said, I think there's a good element of truth in it, but it's probably not the way that I necessarily look at it, because I tend to think of the managers as the ones who are there to implement strategy, if you will, right? And strategy is kind of the overarching thing, but it's not fleshed out. And there's a lot of times where maybe their strategy really truly sucks, and they may not realize it, and they expect you to go ahead and implement it. I think of myself as that person that gets told what the strategy is. Hey, you know what? We need to feed breakfast this morning in a manner that's much safer because we had some troubles. We had some fights or whatever. So go feed breakfast safely. All right. It's up to me to go, okay, I'm going to have a couple extra rifles on the roof. I'm going to slow things down. I'm going to make sure that when we get to the divisions with regards to where the certain STG groups are, that we're going to walk everyone up first. That's my job, is to take on that, the idea about the tactics and not the strategy. So I think that there is something to that, but there's nothing worse than being handed a crap strategy where no matter what you do, it's either not going to work or it's going to be detrimental, because sometimes those people, they don't see what the effects of their strategy is going to be, as well as you will, assuming you're a leader. A leader can take all of those moving parts, get people to invest in them, and be able to have all of the people in the right place at the right time. The rifles on the roof, the extra staff near the dorms, the guy that's calling chow, calling it slow enough. He knows when to make that break, because we're coming up on the next set of STGs that are, you know, housed in a different section or whatever. That's how you make it work. I think that sometimes it's easy for those managers to lose sight of where all those things should be. So sometimes their strategy is great because they don't know any better. And sometimes it's crap because they don't know any better.
Hey, I just want to say something. So my wife was nice enough to get me a cup of water. Getting a little hot. I want you to know something. A little ethical concern I have here. I believe Connie's working on doing a podcast with Andy. I don't know if you saw Andy in the fucking comments there. We obviously we're joking, Andy. We want to have you back, but
Oh my
I don't know what
God.
bullshit you guys have going on here. But there's a comment here. Thank you, TT Connie. You're still the best one later, guys. You know, so I've never been on Connie's podcast
There it is.
yet. Russ, have you ever been on Connie's podcast?
Connie has a podcast?
That's the best question you could ask.
But you know what, though? I bet you Andy knows she has a freaking podcast.
I bet he knows what time it comes on.
Oh, because he's on every episode. He's on every episode.
I also get a feeling, you know, it's like his DVR is set to record that or whatever.
Yes. You know, I don't know what the hell happened there, guys, but I get very jealous if I don't get any attention. I realize that, guys. By the way, I'm joking, but once in a while I do have some good points. Can I get a, hey, good job, Anthony? Or, not like, hey, good job, Connie. Good job, Russ. And yeah, the host is the host. Just let him go. No,
come on. You've had some great jobs in here.
Connie,
great points. Come on. I see them.
Connie, just leave your phone open at 1 a.m. when I cry. That's all I'm asking. Oh, would you look at Andy, the fly behind the wall? Love it. Yeah, because you're on it. Because you're on it, Andy. Because you're on it.
Oh, my God. The torture. I can't deal with the torment.
Oh, but it's fun torment. Hey, so Andy V, he's been following us since week 1, guys. I mean, probably longer than that. I'm talking about the lives. And Andy, by the way, is moving up in corrections. I believe he already's on his first few days of training. So, by the way, we remember a couple of weeks back, Andy was getting ready to get started. Andy's a very welcome member in our community. I believe his questions also help us grow. It reminds us of our roots. Thanks, Cecilia. Another person that definitely supports the channel. Cecilia is always giving out valued comments on our board and just showing support. So thank you for joining on another dialogue. I want to answer Andy's question. I'm going to go with Russ first on this. He goes, I saw a prison documentary where the inmates were talking and fishing to other levels of prison through the toilet. How do you combat inmates sending kites, drugs, and weapons through the toilet?
So that's kind of an old-timey way. There's things that they've tried to do now with plumbing that combat that, but that's only as far as maybe a place that's a little bit newer. There's only so much that you can do because they're going to be ripping those sheets up. But one thing you can do is when they rip those sheets up, I mean, if you've got the time in the midst of everything else, start hitting them in that pocketbook, write them up for that sheet so they have to replace it. Maybe you'll get some love from the lieutenant that hears it or whatever, and you can start making that a way to try and impact that. The other way, of course, that you impact it is my favorite thing, which is actually getting in there and doing a search and finding the drugs, finding the notes, finding the weapons, finding the cell phones. So you know what? Make it expensive for them to do business, as expensive as you can make it. And, just keep that, constant pressure up. Always be looking for finding a way to come up with contraband. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to have people that have a better comprehensive view of what you should be doing from shift to shift to shift. And sometimes you're just going to be on your own, and it's going to be up to you to make it up as you go. But just keep that pressure on and become and learn everything that you can and be the man. Be the man on that tier, on that block.
Yeah, I will tell you one thing. I used to deal with that obviously back in the day as well. It's hard to catch. It is. It's hard. I like what Russ said, though. I mean, these are great ways. They're kind of reactionary, but they're also preventive. Think about it. So, yeah, you got it off this time, but I'm charging you for the sheet. If I've even seen this where if you cause a flood, you get charged. If they can find out it came from your area, they'll even charge you for the overtime. It costs maintenance to fix that concern. So you want to get them good, get them in their pocket. If you could prove it, it's not even about the ag seg time because most of the time they do that shit standing on their head anyway. Go after their commissary. Go after that TV. Go after the things that they're used to having that help them get through their time, no matter what area they're in. You know, at the end of the day, it's not about the area that they're in. The media's got this all wrong. Their definition of solitary, all that stuff's all wrong. When you want to maintain control of a housing unit, you know, go after, if you're allowed, again, I'm not telling you to go rogue here, guys, so don't take it the wrong way. I'm telling you to make sure that when you do things, you do go through the proper channels. I know there's some old school methods. I would love to continue doing those old school methods in regards to, you know, the senior cops used to have more control. They could, you know, go right in and take that TV or go right in and take that commissary. It's a different world nowadays. So as I say this, just make sure that it's in compliance with your policy and procedure. The last thing I want to do is to give some new boots some discretion that they may not be able to have. So remember, guys, this is whatever your facility allows to do. But if you're able to do it, what really gets us control is the stuff that they're used to having that you take away. People think that, you know, here's another thing that we could discuss real quick. Let me get this in. I'll start with whoever wants to go first. But prisons are not run on a reward system. You know, so basically people like to reward good behavior in the hopes that it motivates continued good behavior. That's not how a prison system effectively runs. It's really a loss system, a loss versus gain. You want to motivate good behavior, you take away, just like you do with your kids. Your kid acts foolish, you know, you take away the things that they love. That's what motivates their behavior, because in the end, they're used to that lifestyle. So if there's a reward and you're giving me something I never had, then I'm not dependent on it. But if you take away something that I know that I enjoy, I'm going to want that back because I'm dependent on that. And it's been proven through studies that people are more motivated by a loss than a gain. Right now, the correction system is losing a lot in regards to that level of control. Privileges are now becoming rights. So it makes it very harder for staff to maintain control. And now the system is switching over to a reward system. The reward system doesn't work as good as a loss versus gain system. And now, again, nothing's 100%, you know, but for the most part, you take away something that inmates used to having, like a TV or a commissary, that's more likely going to affect them and hopefully motivate the right behavior, as opposed to, you know, I'll give you this if you do this, or I'll give you that if you do that. Connie, what's your thoughts on that? The motivating the right behavior. Am I on point or?
No, I think you're absolutely on point. I mean, the evidence is out there. And I think our reality is that when we have sort of the politics starting to govern our activities in corrections, it makes it very difficult for us to do what's best to maintain the behavior that we expect to have, right? And so I think that's one of the things that we have to be very mindful of as we, I'm trying my best to be politically correct right now. I mean, we've got a lot of outsiders making decisions about what goes on internal to corrections. As long as we are treating the inmates in a humane manner, we're not violating anyone's Eighth Amendment rights. I feel that those who actually work in the system need to have a voice on how we maintain care, custody, and control. And I feel that we're losing a lot of that because we are shifting gears to this space where inmates feel that they have the right to many things, as opposed to the privileges that they may have earned over time. And so just, you know, if there's a way for us to kind of gain back some of that leverage, I think we need to work on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think right now the shift from privileges to rights is really affecting the system, especially when the rights are being abused. You know, visitation being abused, mail being abused. You know, again, I know they're their rights, but if they tend to take advantage of that and that becomes a route for contraband or behavior that threatens the facility, maybe they start shifting their rights to privileges. And I'm putting extreme. Obviously, when it comes to the mail, we could always go copied. When it comes to the visits, sorry, guys, no more contact for you. You can still get your visits. That's your right. But how we deliver those visits are now going to be non-contact. You know what I mean? So that's where we come in and be able to maintain some level of control. But and real quick, Cecilia, I get it. You got it. So Cage vs. Cocoon is available on Amazon. Andy, thank you for reading my book. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It means the world to me. Hey, Russ, what about that system, lost first game?
I like to have a way to, hit things from all sides, right? There's no one thing that works for everyone, but being able to control what happens at that level, what they're allowed to have, what they're allowed to do is invaluable for keeping, good discipline within the ranks of those inmates. And just the idea that, they're going to, once again, we're going to come back to that whole thing about, micromanage what it is you can and can't do. It doesn't give us a place for us to come in and tell you what we know works, what we know doesn't, and how we would implement it if we were given a chance to sit at the table.
Yeah, and guys, the key here with all this, guys, is just to let you know that, a lot of people from the outside are trying to tell people with experience how to run the inside, and that becomes a conflict because I think the issue is, guys, is that we work in a world that we know can easily be manipulated. So we're always acting on universal precaution, the wolf amongst the sheep. The public or the outside, a lot of them are afraid that by looking for the wolf, it affects the rights of the sheep, not realizing that the greater concern is that wolf amongst the sheep. I mean, again, just the scenario here. Am I willing to lock down a whole neighborhood because there's a killer on the loose? Yes. As crazy as it may sound, I'm sure people are going to be pissed off. I want to leave my house. I want to do this. But the point is there's a killer on the loose. And until I know everybody's safe, people in corrections are willing to lock down the neighborhood. The public is more concerned about that one person that's upset because they're locked down. And I think the bigger picture here is that when the public focuses on that one and they generalize it out, they don't realize that we're focused on many. And your argument may be great for that one, but like Connie mentioned the word ripple effect. You don't know the changes that you're committing to that now has that ripple effect because you're focused on the one. And the biggest concern that we always have is that that one negative thing that hits the news gets that national attention because it connects to politics. And now changes are being made across the nation in regards to how we operate without any care for what we need to accomplish, because we're not at that table. And it's funny because when you watch YouTube channels that are inmate led or former inmates led, I get it. They want to have a perspective. I get it. But even their perspective is really rather limited. And even if they had a bad experience, okay, I get it. But you're generalizing your experience as a way that we all practice under that same light. And obviously that's not the case. And same thing with like solitary and, it's terms that they use to build fear when in the end, yeah, you did have an issue and it wasn't correct. But we also do it everywhere else and there wasn't a problem. So why don't we start holding people responsible for their negative behavior instead of holding people responsible who aren't involved? That to me is the mess up of the system. We rather generalize and stereotype as opposed to really looking at it and holding people responsible. Generalizing and stereotype is what has killed us, but it's what politics loves because generalizing and stereotypes lead to extremes. But when you say, hey, listen, we really need to look at this specifically, well, what do you start doing? You start bringing that to the middle road, and corrections operates in the middle. We don't operate on the left. We don't operate on the right. We operate in the middle. That's where our safest practices are. But in the end, guys, when you have people that are making these decisions from the outside that have no idea what that ripple effect is, and we're trying to, hey, guys, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. Please don't do this. Please don't do this. And all they care about is that immediate result. The sad thing is we're the one in the end that's going to be there when that result later on, that sixth step comes in, that last ripple. And then we're going to go back and say, we told you so, but no one listens. And that's where the sad thing is, guys, and this is the scariest thing of it all, and maybe Connie and Russ could comment on this. We don't want to have to tell the public, I told you so, because when we do, that means someone got killed or hurt. Staff, inmate, regardless. It's not a win for us to say, hey, guys, we told you that wasn't going to work. No, because what's the consequence of that? Us also telling a family, hey, your son, your wife, your whatever got killed today at work. So at the end, this is going to go for changes. Guys, at the end, this could have fucking been prevented, but nobody listened. And now we're attending a service and, seeing the person's family there just devastated because in the end, they know as well that it could have been prevented. Connie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the I told you so's do nothing for no one. I mean, that's just our reality. We're in facilities. We're doing our best to make sure that no one's rights are being violated. I know it almost feels like there is just this lack of trust that we're capable of making the right decisions, the decisions that not only keep us safe, but keep the inmates safe and keep the institution safe. And, I don't really know what we need to do in order to rebuild that confidence that those of us internal to facilities are trying to do the right thing with the resources and the information that we have. I think at this point, the universal precautions aren't something that we could throw to the wind just because someone outside doesn't agree that we should use them, right? Like, we know what keeps us safe. We know what allows us to go home safely to our families day in and day out. And we can't discontinue those activities just because someone has their own political agenda. So for me, it's a matter of doing what's right, knowing what is covered under policy, and being able to substantiate any actions that are taken.
Yeah, and to be honest with you guys, it really comes with us working together on the inside to bring that voice out. We can't do this in silos either. We need to connect with our civilians, connect with our people, and all work together and then go up as a unit. And I guarantee you, if you had custody working together with the service providers and we both bring up the same concerns where custody says I don't feel protected, and if custody says I don't feel protected, there's no way a service provider feels protected because the service provider is leaning on custody. It's all connected. So when you have custody coming up and saying I don't feel protected, then people from the outside well, guess what, guys, those service providers, if custody don't feel protected, then those service providers don't feel protected. So we got to hold off real quick on implementing certain things until we could find out what this concern is, get that staffing where it needs to be, and then eventually have people working together saying, hey, now we got something going because now I feel okay. I always say this, not to minimize the role of our civilians because they obviously need, don't get it wrong, but custody is the template. They're the ones that help the environment to become conducive so we can have those programs, we can have things set in motion so we can start rehabilitation. But if you're not setting that canvas, where custody is able to be effective, feel safe, and do their job, you can't expect the people like the service providers to come in and feel that level of protection because they're going to be able to know it when they get that staff member that they're going to and they're hesitant. Hey, I don't know if you want me to address that because, again, we're understaffed. So, it's a huge ripple effect. Hey, Russ, you have anything on this? I have two more questions I want to get to, but you have any response to this, what we just discussed?
I think I'm about out on that. I'm ready to go. I was looking at all the questions here.
I have two more I wanted to get to. I know we got to come to a close soon. Just two more. One is, this goes to actually Connie first, and then maybe we all can comment on this as well, but it comes from Andy. Then I want to get to Cracker Killer. Well, that's a unique name. Good one, Cracker Killer. I'll just say Craker. We'll call it maybe Craker. I'm hoping it's Craker.
Release the Craker.
Yeah. What's up, Jay? Okay, so Andy. Sorry, guys, I'm laughing because it caught me by surprise. I'm not. I don't think this guy spends all day killing saltines. You know what I mean? I'm assuming. Well, you know what? Why not? Why? I'm not going to stereotype. I'm not going to judge. I'm assuming this guy loves to eat those crackers, those saltine crackers. So I'm good with it. Well done. Connie, what happens when an inmate has serious mental health issues but is set to be released?
So we work with that inmate from the point of intake until the point of release. So we do our best to stabilize them. We try to make sure that there's that continuity of care. So if they have a treatment provider in the community, we try to make sure that they have some setup to go back to that treatment provider. If that person needs an inpatient level of care, we try to make sure that that is in place as well. So there are very rare incidents of an inmate with serious mental health issues that ends up getting released back to the street without some sort of reentry plan, discharge plan, whatever you call it in your respective facilities. The other thing we try to make sure that is in place is that they get their meds, whether it's already having their prescriptions with them or sending those prescriptions to whatever their respective pharmacy is so that they can pick up those meds. It's always challenging when there's a mentally ill individual going out into the community. We'd like to make sure that they always have supervision and that there is some plan in place so that they're not out there trying to make decisions on their own. But I don't know that any system is 100% with that. I would like to believe that, many of the inmates who've gone out, who've had serious mental health issues, they've gone into the emergency room, which is also another option to get treatment and to sort of be placed, because sometimes the community receives someone from the hospital a little more openly than they would receive someone coming directly from the prison system.
Yeah, and also I want to add something else too. Our biggest concern, I think, in the prison system is when you have someone that has mental health issues that's about ready to be released but doesn't have a place to go. So then you're going to see, mental health, social services working together, hopefully for placement. But if the inmate is not of the right mind, technically, we could always look to civilly commit the inmate. If that's the case, where we feel the inmate's a risk or they can't go back to a system that can properly monitor them. But again, that's a real serious decision that's made between the mental health department, probably the receiving hospital. I mean, I'm sure, every time an inmate gets released, you have to notify the prosecutor. So there's a lot of discussions happening at that point. But I do know the agency will make every effort to not release an inmate who we feel is not safe. But again, we're also limited because once their time is done, and we're talking about an inmate that's completely maxed out, we have no control of that inmate. But again, there will be means afterwards. We don't want to just release them. But again, it takes a lot of work. But by the way, that process probably starts happening within 6 months of their release. Mm-hmm. So it's something that is really, we exhaust every effort. And I can honestly say it's been my experience. I can't talk on the jails perhaps, but I can talk for the prison side that I don't think there's ever been an inmate sent out that had no place to go. I really don't think that's our effort. So I've never seen it. I'm not saying it happens or it doesn't happen. But when you get 6 months to prepare for their release, there's so many resources. And at that point, guys, let's also add this. If that inmate ain't finding a place to go, it's not because we're not doing our due diligence behind the wall. It's welcome to the community who's not. The community says all these things. Then when you go to, hey, now you got to step up. This person's coming out. All of a sudden, these open arms that they have start to close off. Hey, two last questions. I'll give this one to Russ first. I do want to get to the body cam, but I got one more that I want to discuss. And it was from Craker Killer. If you get dashed, so I'm assuming if you get, sprayed or whatever it is, get the cocktail. Should you walk away if they're locked in their cell or spray them? This is a very ongoing issue. So I want to make sure that we cover it correctly. So what do you got, Russ?
Okay. So first of all, there's a lot of specificity right there in your particular question. Every single department is going to have a different answer to that, because of the way that they do policy and procedure, right? Now, having said that, I could foresee a situation where no matter whether they've addressed it or they haven't, that you could be totally justified. If you can't see at that moment and you're trying to get to safety, if they have more or you suspect that they might have more that's on the way for you, if you suspect that maybe they have a spear in there and maybe they're going to be able to get you that way, there's all kinds of ways that this could potentially be justified. So I think that your chances of being able to articulate a reasonable approach, a reason for what you did, probably is going to fall within that whole reasonableness reasonableness doctrine that we see in things like Graham v. Connor. But there might be some things that are more prohibitive, though, within your particular policy and procedure. This is where you really need to know your stuff. This is where you need to know not just about your policy and procedure, but you need to know about case law. You need to know about the laws of your state. You need to know what your penal code says about, how much weight and authority and discretion that you have to deploy something like that. But like I say, I do see situations where you would be ultimately justified in using it. I see other ones, though, where you might not be. The most important thing is do the safe thing, do the smart thing.
Yeah, one of the questions you have to ask yourself, does the inmate pose a threat to you? So you got to realize something here, guys. When the inmate splashes you, especially if they're in a locked cell, you have to be careful how the courts view your actions after that, because they could take it as retaliatory. So the biggest concern here is if you get splashed and the inmate is in the locked cell and they no longer pose a threat to you, you spraying them or you opening up the cell door to go in on them, that's going to be a concern that is going to make it to the higher level 100%. So let's say you do get splashed or you do get dashed. If you could, like Russ said, kind of get away, and at that point, the inmate doesn't pose a threat because they're secured in their cell, you may have to figure out a better approach, which means I like what this guy said. Where is it? He got dashed. He closed the slot, finished his round, be the bigger man. Okay, but let me explain what he's saying before I'm not telling you guys, but I get what Jay's saying, so bear with me on this. We're not telling you guys that you have to accept that. When an inmate's in a closed cell and they splash you, it sucks. It sucks. I've had my hands on some shit as well, so I can actually relate to this a little bit. But what I will say is that when it's addressed, maybe it shouldn't be you that address it. If the inmate's already secured, you can call the supervisor, come up with a plan of action. The key is that you want to make sure that whatever action you take, the inmates can't pull that retaliatory route. A lot of these inmates that are splashing you want you to go into their cell. They want you to spray them. It's part of the game. They want to get that retaliatory. I'll guarantee you the next day you'll have lawyers all over you, and they're going to ask you, because it's the outside looking in, guys. It's a different day today. They're going to ask you, okay, you got sprayed. The question that this person asked on the comment was very key. Look what he just said. But the inmate is locked in their cell. That's a different scenario than being splashed on an open dorm. The inmate's locked in their cell. So the question that Russ got at and I got at is the inmate a threat to you locked in their cell? That I want you to be able to answer that. Is the inmate a threat to you while they are locked in their cell? And if you can somehow say that they are, because they really are, I'm not telling you to lie in your report, neither is Russ. If they are, then you got to justify that. But if they're not, I like what Jay said. I get it. Most people may not get what we're saying here, but trust and believe, if it's to keep your job in the long run, you got to remove the emotion, because that's what they want from that. They want that emotional response. They want you to be foolish. But I guarantee you, when it starts to get micromanaged from the higher ups, all the way through the court system, someone's going to ask that one question. Why did you spray them if they were secured in their cell? Or why did you feel the need to charge in there if they weren't a threat to themselves or a threat to others? So you have to be very careful, because I just seen this go sideways.
Yeah, you're never gonna be able to justify going into. Well, I'm not going to say never, but I'm going to say there's almost no chance of you justifying entering the cell. There is a potential, though, for making the case for using the pepper spray if there's some sort of present danger to yourself. If he's got another cup of Dookie and you're already having a hard time responding and you can't see or something, I would say that would justify it. There may be other justifications as well. You just got to think about, you have to be able to articulate that. You have to be able to put that down on paper, and you have to be able to make a justifiable case. Something else like opening a cell, that's going to almost certainly be completely out of bounds, and you don't want to get yourself into that position having to try and write and justify that, because it's much harder for anyone to see it. right?
Yeah,
I believe I could write that using chemical agents from the outside in order to make it so I could get past him and get back away,
yeah, but
or
then
stop him from throwing that from that next cup. It may be hard, but what I'm saying is you have to look at the totality of the circumstances, and you have to be able to do it like that.
Right. So here's the thing. So first off, when I mentioned it, Russ is right. Want to make sure we get the thought out. Russ, 100% correct. If there's a cellmate there and that person poses a threat to the cellmate, you may have to. But if you spray them, you have to go in now, Russ. If you spray that inmate, you have to eventually go in. They got to be decontaminated.
They do have to be decontaminated, but
So
they
that's
also
gonna have to
they also have to submit to being placed in restraints. But
right,
that's
but once
that's
you
something.
spray that inmate, you're gonna have to, even if the inmate's being resistant, you're gonna have to get a cell extraction now.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to get that inmate out.
And so it's gonna turn into an extraction because they have to submit to cuffs at that point. There's no but you should be completely out of the equation by that time.
Yeah. And by the way, look what Russ just said, guys. The key here is once you eliminate yourself from that, now it's a team that's more objective and less emotional. The last thing you want to do is for it to be proven that the reason why you went in there wasn't for the safety and security of the inmate, was retaliatory. If that inmate, it's proven that inmate's not a threat, then the reason why you sprayed them or went into that cell was the only other option is you went after them because they sprayed you. So look what Russ just said. Look what we just said was the fact that remove yourself from that equation so you don't have that retaliatory aspect. And you better be able to justify. Like if I had an inmate that's, throwing shit at me and they're acting irate, but in the end, there's also a cellmate. And now I don't think that inmate is, in a position to be around that cellmate, you could justify. But again, you're going to have to go through a lot of channels to get that approved. But I like what Russ said. If you got splashed, remove yourself from the situation and try to be objective in the manner of handling it. But that was a great question. And we have one more I want to get to. I know Cecilia said a lot of questions that you might have trouble closing, but the one question I wanted to get at, you know what? Let's do this. There's a dialogue on cameras, body-worn cameras. Guys, that's going to be too late to start today. We could focus on that first thing next Tuesday, because that's a big dialogue in itself. We have a lot to cover on that. So, guys, I will get to that question. Just remind me next Tuesday when we go live so we all can get it, because we're all going to have a perspective on that. But the last question I want to get to, it comes from Quentin. What's your opinion on corrections as a field? So corrections as a field, I'm assuming we're talking about different departments, different avenues, not just correctional officers, but just in general. Would you say a majority of society sees it as a legitimate career field? How hard is it to make corrections a career? So let's go with Russ first, and then we'll go with Connie, and then myself to close.
Okay, so yeah, I think corrections is a great field. The problem with it, though, is that, society isn't necessarily going to see it the way you would like them to see it. And so, you have to be happy with your own self and what your own decisions are. Society is just not in a position where it's going to very often see us as the heroes we are, even though we know that what we do is a very noble endeavor. I mean, we're really there. We're in that seam between the public and the people that want to kill the public, essentially. So it really has to be a case of you wanting it and you being okay with finding a bunch of self-satisfaction in the service you're providing, even though it's probably never going to be recognized. That's the way I looked at it. I always looked at myself as I was my own strictest taskmaster, was myself, not the public, not anyone, because they couldn't see what I was doing. So I had to make it about what I was doing, the service I was providing inside the institution.
Hey, Duty Ron, what's up, brother? Good to see you. Hey,
was there?
Yeah, that's Duty Ron.
Yeah, was there a question, something about SWAT?
Yeah, do you want to get to that? You want to do this question?
I'd like to finish up with that if possible.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll give that to you last. We'll do this one. I'll give it to you. I'll get it. I'll find it. Hey, Connie, what's your thoughts on the question that Russ? Where is it? My mind went blank.
Corrections as a field. Career. I got it. So for me, I feel that corrections, there's so many places and spaces where you can go with corrections, right? So yes, you can go the officer route, but look at how many different roles there are to play in corrections. Yes, it has many, many challenges. And, depending on which role you step into, you would be more or less challenged, right? But I feel like it's also a space where you can make quite the difference. And I know we don't focus so much on the difference because there's so much other stuff out there, right? Like the politics, the bureaucracies, a lot of things that make the job very difficult. But when you think about fundamentally corrections, right? We are in the business of people. We are in the business of correcting behaviors, right? And while many of us feel that we don't contribute to that correction, many of us actually do, right? Like we're going into work, we are the role models, right? We're going into work, and yes, there are those guys that may never improve. They will never change their life, like I get that part. But there are so many people who they're looking to us to kind of see, like, so how do we conduct ourselves anymore? Like I never forget working on Rikers. I was in the Bing. I was talking to this guy, he had done all this time. He was finally close to the end of his time. So they were bringing him from upstate into Rikers, which is why I was doing the assessment. And his fear of how do I be a neighbor, right? Like he had no idea of how he was going to step back into the world, into a community, and how to engage with people. And so the fact that we're having this conversation to me was like, oh my goodness, really? This is really crazy. But the reality is that we play such a significant role in showing them how to conduct themselves, in helping them to make better decisions, to give them insights into the world that they haven't engaged in for so long. So for me, I think that corrections is a great place to be because it's going to not only allow you to affect change in the lives of others, but it will also allow you to grow as an individual because you have so many other options of ways and spaces that you can get involved.
Yeah, and guys, just to comment on this as well, I believe that we do serve a purpose behind the wall. I mean, as I moved up, I got to see a pitch that was less myopic. I get to see all the different departments and actually see how everybody works together to, have that product, which basically should be the successful release of an inmate that is rehabilitated. I believe we all have a role in that, including the officers, service providers or whatnot. So I think it is a very noble career, but again, it depends on what you're looking for. I don't know what what it is that you want to achieve in life. What are your values? What are your beliefs? I mean, ultimately, the things that we connect to should be things that we have a belief and value in. So again, for me, corrections hit a lot of different components for me that match with my beliefs and my values. Even as I moved up, being able, to help at that higher level, staff, inmates, whatever it is, there is a purpose here that comes from, being professional, having integrity, and just kind of riding this thing out. So I do believe it's a noble career. I believe it's a career that most people don't understand. I believe we're bastardized by both sides of politics. So I believe that in the end, most people will never see the value of what we do because we're not on a platform to advertise that value. I mean, think about it, guys. Our job is, they hate us as if we're the ones that are, committing the crimes or if we're the ones that are arresting them and bringing them in. No, our job is to maintain them. One of the hardest jobs you can ever have. But in the end, we devote our time. We try our best to, get some positive results in an environment that they don't want to be in. We're dealing with people that don't want to be in there, and we're telling them you have to change and you have to listen to us. And it's not the easiest thing in the world, but when you get that one person to turn around and that one person to listen, there is tremendous value in that. I believe so. Enough to where I'm going to ride this thing out. I got 5 more years left. And I think that when my time is gone and I'm done, I know that I've had a life in my service of others. Right? Ultimately, that's how you judge things anyway, right? Do you feel that corrections a profession that services others? Yes. That's all we do is service others. So I do think it's a noble career. And wherever you want to go in corrections, again, based on your values and your beliefs, you'll find something that will give you that service to others that provides value back to us. Hey, Russ, I couldn't find that question. Do you want to just
Yeah, I can just speak to it real quick. We had someone, I believe he was a detective, and he was asking, how often SWAT teams do something inside the prison. And I wasn't sure if he was talking about outside SWAT teams or actual prison SWAT teams. And we were lucky enough in California Department of Corrections, we had dedicated hostage rescue teams actually at our prison. They were guys that, they were the ones, they had their hands up, they stepped forward, they, take on that extra role. And so I was lucky enough many times to train with them, to be a thorn in their side, if you will, being a hostage taker and getting shot multiple times and stuff like that. And it's a great service in that they do more than just, worry about hostages being taken in the prison. We have mutual aid agreements. We had our negotiations management team, which is part of our CRT unit, go out there and talk a guy down that had a gun. Sometimes they go out there, and when we have our investigations unit have to serve a search warrant on an outside deal with regards to, usually it's dope and stuff like that. Of course, it's coming into the prison. They'll go and do that. My very last hurrah, the very last day, and the very last time that I had my hand up, we were going to go in the middle of the night. We had word that a prison camp near us had a gun inside of it. And so I stepped forward because I knew it was the last thing I was ever going to do as a peace officer. And those guys, I went with them and took the whole camp down at gunpoint. I think there was 250 guys that we ended up having to do, cuffing operations and everything else on, and do a complete search, and found all kinds of cell phones. Didn't find the gun, but it was a thrill to work with those guys. And so they serve in a lot more capacities than I think people really realize. Those guys that, are qualified to do the hostage rescue, to, serve the search warrants and all that kind of thing. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, what we're going to do is on next week, guys, we'll also, I think the question was, how often are SWAT team officers used in a prison? So I think that's actually a whole episode in itself. So we could add that to the body cams, because there's many reasons why you're going to employ those specialized teams. And we could talk about that it depends on what the specialized team is. Hostage negotiation, emergency response team, like Russ said. So we can cover that. I think that would be a great dialogue to start off next week. But in the meantime, Russ, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to say I had a blast. So anyway, I can't wait until next Tuesday, whatever that's going to bring. And hope everyone out there is going to stay safe, stay frosty, stay nervous. Don't let complacency bite you in the ass.
Oh,
I like that.
Yeah. Guys, don't forget, Russ got Keepers of Chaos on Facebook. If you get a chance, check it out. Connie.
Listen, I enjoy doing this with you guys. I think it's a lot, when we sit here and we're answering these questions, hopefully, folks understand that we aren't scripted, and we are really just speaking out of a space of experience and, pulling from everything that we have in order to give you guys the best possible insights and response. So if this is stuff that you can take back and use tomorrow to stay safe, like, we've done our best.
Yeah, I wish I could show you something today. I got a picture, but I'm not allowed to show it. But someone was in the academy class, and they're taking training, and on the big screen is a picture of me, and he wanted to say, see, I can read his comment, though, if you guys don't mind. I thought the comment kind of made our day as a Tier Talk family. So basically, I wish I could show you the picture, but I don't think the picture was authorized. But he goes, took this picture this AM. So it's a picture of a couple of officers. They're training, and there's a big screen, and there's an instructor. And it says, took this picture this AM. Just want to let you know you appreciate it and save lives. Thank you. I mean, is that it's pretty cool to get that. So guys, again, next week we're going to touch on body cams. So I'm going to give that assignment to Cecilia. Please remind us about the body cams. And Jay Manfredo, if you're in next week, please remind us. Or no, it was Jay Manfredo, you got the job if you're here next week. Or JR, please remind us about when to employ those specialized teams. So we can definitely.
I think there's one question that came in. I think we want to add to that. Some Zfael asks, is it a bad thing if guns are in prison?
Oh, all right. Well, Zfael, you usually come to every show. Do me a favor. Can you also mention that next week. And then what do we got? Ange asked, do inmates routinely masturbate in jail? Does the urge to do so just sort of go away in that environment? If inmates do masturbate, do bunkies just pretend not to notice? Okay, Ange, so outside looking in, Ange, next Tuesday at 9 o'clock, we'll also address that question because that's a question from the outside looking in. Now, guys, again, another great show. I appreciate it. Look forward next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Have another live. We will have another show posted up this Thursday. It's going to be about report writing. We're going to focus on some advice for report writing. So if you're interested, very specific to the profession, we'll post it up. And if you guys get a chance, 2 videos that we posted up last week that are doing pretty well. If you guys are interested, if you guys get a chance and you guys want to check it out, I'll tell you what the 2 are. I thought they were good videos that are getting some good play. One is, well, I have the leaked video up of the videos from Arizona, but I wanted you guys to see if it's my first day working in corrections and I don't feel supported. That was a good video because that was motivated by an email from one of our viewers. And it's actually 2 more. The other 2 is your facility violating policy because it's understaffed? I believe I did that that was you, Connie, right? We did that together?
I think so.
And then the one before that was me and Gary York investigating dirty prison staff. Here's what you need to know. Just some good topics. So, Ange, I expect to see you next week. And I'll definitely get to those questions. It's 11 o'clock here. And as always, guys, show us Tear Talk. Please stay safe. Like Russ says, stay nervous. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday.